Hello and welcome to the Cognitohazard Iceberg. So normally I do video game content. I've always been somewhat of a gamer. I like playing Pokemon, Fire Emblem, Call of Duty, Mario, all that stuff. But I wanted to do something a bit different, and I wanted to do something that I personally enjoy because I am very into weird stuff, especially very macabre and dark things that exist on the internet. However, what I was like, what do I do? Because there's like so many icebergs out there, and I was trying to find one that just was not done before. And from what I can tell, this one hasn't been, or at least not to this extent. There are some other Cognitohazard icebergs out there, but they're not as in-depth. Like this one is 8 tiers, and the tiers go from like tier 1, where it's like parents are flawed, to tier 8 talking about a set of words that can kill you. So yeah, this is a really big, bizarre iceberg. I'd also like to ask people to leave a like. I don't normally do that, but considering this took close to a year to complete and to put together and everything, yeah, please just support the video. And without any further rambling and stupidity, well, there will be more rambling and stupidity, but not about intro stuff. Let's get into the video. So the first entry we have here is parents are flawed. This is the idea that your parents don't necessarily know what's right for you, and they may not always be doing what is best for you, even though they may think they are. It's a pretty standard one. This is, again, tier 1, so we're going to like kind of normal stuff. But there are some more heavy entries on tier 1, so just be warned about that. Next we have teachers don't live at school. This is a very simple concept, but one that is kind of weird to you when you're a kid, which is the idea that the teachers don't actually live at the school. They have homes and lives and marriages and all that good stuff. Santa Claus. This is another kind of childhood one where, you think something is real and then your parents are like, no, Timmy, that's me. I've been going under the tree and putting presents for the last 9 years. And it's kind of funny because I don't feel like Santa Claus is this like really earth-shattering one like a lot of parents think it would be, because like when I was a kid I didn't really care. I was like, oh cool, so it's not a big fat man in a red suit breaking into my house, it's just my mom. Well, that's fine. Spoilers, again, this is pretty common scratch the surface stuff. It's just that, people may spoil things for you online or in person that you don't want to know just yet because you haven't watched the TV show, played the game, read the book, whatever. You haven't gone to that point yet. It's a very simple concept. It's not that weird. Everyone knows this one. Memes. Memes are another really simple concept. They are images that people spread online that are meant to be funny or meant to repeat an idea. And yeah, we all know what memes are. I think everyone's aware of what a meme is. Lying is when somebody tells you something that is inherently false. Unlike misinformation, which we'll get to further into this iceberg, lying is more so done for malicious or intentional purposes, while misinformation is mostly spread because people just don't know what they're talking about. Lying is usually used to cover up things, mostly to just kind of like get something, personal gain, all that bad stuff. Very, very simple. Everyone does it. Everyone's lied at some point in their lives, so we all know what this is. Trauma is an event in which you receive physical or mental harm and it carries with you for a while after. While a normal event where you would get injured or where you would suffer, usually you move on from that. With trauma, you feel it for days, months, years to come. So trauma is a bit different than standard pain. Misinformation, as we mentioned with lying earlier, is similar to lying, but the difference is with misinformation that you are actually not doing it on purpose. It's just more so that you are misremembering something or you're spreading something that you heard somewhere that is not actually true, but you think it's true. Deathconsciousness. I love how we went from like parents are flawed, teachers don't live at school, and sometimes people get things wrong too. This is the idea that when you are born, you will actually die. Nobody has any sort of real life whatsoever, and it's a very nihilistic idea that human beings are dead as long as they live, because our lives are, in the grand scheme of things, very short. It is probably the first and heaviest thing on tier 1, and yeah, let's move on from this, because this is depressing. Propaganda is something that's put forward by companies and politicians and other things to spread an idea. The simple concept behind it is that effectively they want you to believe or do something, so what they will often do is they will spread it via the media or via social media or ad campaigns that they're doing something, or that someone else is doing something in order to get you to believe it. Propaganda isn't always untrue, but often is, and is almost always a tool for something nefarious, although you could also argue that things like ad campaigns and such are propaganda. Propaganda is a very kind of weird topic to get into, and it's not very easy to explain despite the fact that we all know why it is. Repetition is the idea that if somebody tells you something over and over and over again, that you will actually do it. You will be more prone to doing or believing something if it is told to you repeatedly. For example, if I tell you to subscribe and I do it in a somewhat subtle way throughout this video, you will eventually do it. That is how repetition works. Repetition is the idea that if somebody tells you something over and over and over again, that you will actually do it. You will be more prone to doing or believing something if it is told to you repeatedly. For example, if I tell you to subscribe and I do it in a somewhat subtle way throughout this video, you will eventually do it. That is how repetition works. Lovemaking, well, is when a man and a woman love each other very much. No, that's not what this is. So, and we all know what lovemaking is. I won't say the actual word because I think YouTube would get very angry. But I think this is actually referring to the idea that when you're a child and you find out how babies are made, that kind of shatters your whole worldview. That's the only way I can think of this being a cognitohazard. Again, it's kind of like the Santa Claus or the teachers don't live at school thing. It's the idea that when you're a kid, this is actually something that's like mind-blowing information. But as an adult, you're well aware of what it is. At least I hope you are. Overthinking is when you put something in your mind and you analyze it repeatedly to the point where it actually becomes a problem. For example, if I have a conversation with somebody and I think I've said something that offends them, and I keep thinking about what I could have said or what I could have done, and that actually isn't anything I did at all, that's overthinking. Because what I've done is I've effectively created this scenario in my head that isn't real. Overthinking is pretty much just the idea that you're going to analyze something that you've done or heard to the point where you just kind of create this own scenario that just keeps building on itself. Overthinking can actually be pretty detrimental if you do it too much. I think a lot of people would kind of think, like, why is this, even on this iceberg? It's not really a cognitohazard, but overthinking kind of is. It can even kind of play out as like kind of a mind virus, although we'll get to real mind viruses once we get further into this. That's more like a tier 6 to 8 topic, but I don't want to get into that right now. We're already at like the weird parts of the iceberg. We've already talked about Deathconsciousness, but it gets worse. Trust me. Anatomy. This is referring to the human anatomy. I believe this is kind of talking about the idea that humans are actually very weirdly designed. We've got parts of our bodies that don't really do anything or may have done something in the past but don't do that anymore. We have parts of the body that die out over time, like I forget what it's called right now, but the part of the brain that develops during childhood and then calcifies and dies out as you grow up. There's other weird things about the human body too, like for example, how the neck cradles one of the most important parts of the body, that being your brain, yet is like this super thin thing that can like be smashed or broken very easily. Then there's other things like the fact that like the male genitalia is located outside of the body where it could potentially be harmed. There's a lot of weird things relating to human anatomy that are just there for some reason, or exposed for some reason, or endangered for some reason. But yeah, I think that's what this is referring to. Inequality. This is the idea that some people are not treated equal to others, and this can be for a variety of reasons like gender, race, social status, financial status. There's a lot of reasons that inequality exists, but inequality is something that does exist. Animal behavior is a weird one because it could relate to a lot of things, particularly the endearing behaviors that dogs and cats do, like cats clawing at scratching posts or looking at you for a really cute look when they want you to feed them, or dogs tilting their heads to the side when they, see something or hear something. Or it could refer to other things like weird behaviors that animals have done and have been observed doing in the wild. I'm not really sure what this one's relating to. This is actually a very broad category. Next up, we have superstition. Superstition is the idea that if you do certain things, you will either increase or lower your luck. For example, if you break a mirror, it's said that you will get 7 years of bad luck. If you see a double rainbow, it's believed you will have 10 years of good luck, or that you will become very rich very soon. Superstition is a bit of a weird one. Some people believe in it, some people don't, and it's an interesting topic for sure. Next up, we have climate change, and this is the part of the video where I state for the record that I do not own any political opinions in this video. Please do not ban me, YouTube. So there's two ways of looking at this one. You can either look at it in the sense that we all know of climate change, where it's effectively the planet's ozone and climate are changing in reaction to both time as well as certain things like pollution. Or you can view this as the more conspiratorial part, where climate change is quote-unquote not real, and that it's entirely a conspiracy thing because a lot of the companies that fund climate change research actually will benefit off of climate change being real, and therefore they make money off it. It's an interesting loop if you want to go down that rabbit hole, but that is the one conspiracy and one kind of like known thing about this. I'm going to move on from this because I'm actually terrified about talking about this one any longer. Next up, we have comparison. This is the idea of comparing one thing to another. There's really not much to talk about with this one. In fact, I don't even know why it's on here. Optical illusions occur when you look at something that is designed to trip up your eyes. For example, there are several paintings out there that play with the idea of optical illusion and play with the idea of you as a person not really being able to properly register it at first sight if you're looking at just at face value. There are several art pieces. Another thing that kind of happens with optical illusion is when you are driving into a city and a building actually looks much smaller than it is because you are farther away, or when you're in, say, a really hot place and you see kind of those like squiggly lines in the distance created by like heat. That can also count as an optical illusion. So yeah, it's a pretty simple concept and one that occurs pretty often without you even kind of realizing it does. Consciousness, I think, therefore I am. Consciousness is the idea that you are aware of your surroundings, that you know of your surroundings, that you know who you are, what you are, where you are, that you understand that you were born and that you will die someday, and understand that you have emotion, understand that you have thoughts and opinions and various other things. Consciousness is actually a very complicated subject now that I think about it. It's kind of something you take for granted, which ironically would make it subconscious, but anyway, evolution can refer to a couple of things. It can refer to, one, the idea that things change, grow, and expand as time goes on. They begin to lose other features and gain other features based on their environment and surroundings. There's also the idea of, and this maybe what it actually referring to, is the idea that Darwinian evolution is actually incorrect. This has actually been a scientific fringe theory that has been going on for about 20 some years now. And it's the idea that there are missing links in Darwinian theory because Darwinian theory is actually incorrect. I don't think that's what's going for here, especially because it's pretty early into the iceberg and that sounds like something that would be on like tier 3 or 4. And it's very sad that something that deep in that fringe would be on tier 3 or 4, which kind of tells you how bad a lot of the later tiers are going to get. But regardless, I think that's the two things it's referring to. Discrimination. This actually ties into inequality again. Discrimination is effectively when somebody deprives you of an opportunity or takes something away from you based on your race, age, gender, social status, financial status, what have you, and gives it to somebody else because they are more in line with their own biases. Substances are drugs and alcohol. That's pretty simple and self-explanatory. I really don't feel like I need to go further into this one. Disability is effectively when somebody suffers from a natural disability, something they're born with, or something that they gain through an injury that inhibits their ability to function as a person. For example, my back is injured. That means I technically have a disability. I wouldn't consider it a disability, considering there's a lot worse things in the world than having a really bad back, but it technically does count as one. TMI is too much information, or the idea that if somebody's talking to you and they tell you something you really don't want to know, like what color shit they took that morning, that's TMI. Yawning is a signal that your body gives you to tell your mind that you're tired and that you should be going to bed, and I do this often, probably because I'm exhausted all the time. Mental illness is a disease of the mind. It is something that is effectively what happens when your brain is telling you something that isn't true, or is making you believe something that isn't true, or it's something that causes you to be paranoid, or to act very odd, or to be socially inappropriate. There's a lot of things that mental illness can lead to, but none of them are good. Cults are effectively groups of people who are not members of any recognized organized religion, but usually are religious beliefs carried by a group of people. Cults are often very dangerous and fringe, however, there are also large amounts of cults that are not dangerous and are simply just groups of people who believe in something that is not registered as a normal thing to believe in. If we want to get super technical into this, the only thing that really changes cults from religions and separates them is the fact that religions are recognized officially and cults are not. That sounds like a very kind of cynical thing to say, but that is technically the actual separation between the two. So, for example, if Christianity tomorrow stopped being considered a standard religious practice and became very fringe and outcasted, it would become a cult. The game, which was almost impossible to look up, seems to be the simple joking term where it's like, oh, I acknowledged the game and I lost the game. I don't know if that's what this is referring to. It could also be referring to the fact that many games have rewards and punishments that kind of register an emotional response when they happen. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it just refers to the first thing, though. It's nothing too complex. Phobias are fears. They are things that people are afraid of. For example, I am afraid of heights, spiders, and women. And you may be afraid of something like water, or you might be afraid of the dark. There are many phobias out there, and this is kind of an interesting topic. I feel like you could make a whole video talking about phobias, but yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Next up, we have free will advertising. This is actually a pretty simple concept, although it's something a lot of people don't seem to be very aware of. It is the idea that people tend to talk about things that they're really into. For example, if I say I'm playing the new Mario game, or if I decide to stream Call of Duty Black Ops 7 when it comes out, I am inadvertently giving Nintendo and Activision in those cases free will advertising, since I am effectively talking about their product without necessarily intending to. This is basically everywhere these days. If you're watching a game on Twitch or YouTube, that is free will advertising, as the person streaming it is advertising the game without actually advertising the game. Risk is when you take a calculated chance that something bad will happen, but you also will be greatly rewarded for it happening. For example, if I go out and buy a lottery ticket, I am spending money, but I'm also risking gaining money. And risk is something that people do almost on a regular basis, and a lot of people don't even think about. In fact, not thinking about it is kind of why society's in the shape it's in right now, and the economy's in the shape it's in right now. But we won't go into that. That's a whole other topic. Gore. Gore is just guts, blood, and nasty stuff. I assume this is referring to effectively how you can just find gore videos on YouTube and Twitter and everywhere else, like at random, at the worst possible times, when you really don't want to see them. Bad parenting loops around to what we talked about earlier with parents being flawed. However, with bad parenting, a lot of the times, bad parenting is something that you can pick up on very easily, and unlike flawed parenting, where it's somebody doing something they think is good for the child, even though it may or may not be, bad parenting is when somebody repeatedly does something bad for their children and thinks that's a normal thing to do. A great example of this is parents getting their kids involved in their political crusades, because obviously a child has no ability to understand what they are doing or what they are talking about. Therefore, by getting your child invested in something that they are unaware of and unprepared to have a discussion about, they can't have that discussion. Another more simpler example of this would be like if you leave your kid by the pool and then they drown. Abusive parents, this ties back into what I talked about with bad parenting and flawed parenting, except this is obviously the darkest end of the scale. This is parents who effectively abuse their children, not necessarily because they think that it is a parenting tactic, but more so just because they're awful human beings and probably should be thrown in somewhere where they don't have access to theirs or anyone else's kids ever again. Terminal illness is the idea that you are stricken with an illness that will eventually kill you. It is not like a standard illness in that being terminal, it means that you are definitely going to die from it. Late stage cancer, AIDS, various other things, these are all terminal illnesses. My red is not your red is a very simple concept, and it is something that every single person deals with. While there is a definitive red, and someone like me, for example, has perfect color spectrum and that I can see every single color as it's meant to be seen, not everyone has this. For example, my mother is technically colorblind, and she cannot see every single color as it's meant to be seen. She particularly struggles with things like certain reds and certain greens, some purples, and this pretty much applies to any color. Like, it can apply to, like, my blue is not your blue, my yellow is not your yellow, my green is not your green. Basically, any color there is. Although there is a definitive way to see color, you may not see the color the way that's supposed to be seen. Identical twins. This refers to the fact that some people are born as twins, triplets, quadruplets, whatever, and they are genetically identical. They look like each other, they sound like each other, they walk like each other, talk like each other, and this is just something that happens in nature. Sometimes two children will be born looking exactly and sounding exactly the same as each other. Chronic pain is when you are in pain all the time. This can be related to an injury or an illness. It is a very simple concept and is a very unfortunate concept. Thank you for sitting through this weird video. I don't know what to say. I've been studying this for about a year to try and kind of put together this video, researching everything as best as I could. There are going to be concepts later in this iceberg that are just too complex for me to get through, so I will need commenters' help on that. But something that I was kind of interested with this is, well, yes, I am mostly known for gaming content. I do like really dark, macabre stuff. I do like really interesting philosophical ideals and scientific study and stuff. So to kind of be able to talk about that for a couple of videos, because I'm going to separate each tier into a separate video. Next will be tier 2, and it will come out faster if this video gets a lot of likes. But before we end this video off, I do want to say thank you for watching. I do want to say that the iceberg that I used is in the description, both in the Reddit post where it came from, and also my Discord server. I will upload a an image of the iceberg for people to see. So thank you for watching. Like I said, if this video is successful, I will in fact be uploading the next one faster. Words are failing me right now. I'm very tired. I've been up since 2 a.m. Not important. Don't worry about it. Nothing relating to a dead dog at all on my street. Just it's fine. But anyway, thank you for watching, and next time.